Good evening, dear doctors. Welcome to the 4th Dermatological Summit by Paulson's Derma and Wisdom Path Lab. I will request Mr. Partho Paul, Managing Director, Paulson's Derma, to kindly introduce Dr. Shubhra Dhar, our Chief Speaker of the evening and the Chief Pathologist at Wisdom Path Lab. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, doctors. I welcome you all to the 4th Dermatopathological Summit initiated by Paulson's Derma and Wisdom Path Lab. Today's topic is the clinico-dermatopathological correlation of interesting cases. Our dermatopathology expert, Dr. Shubhra Dhar, will spearhead the subject along with her esteemed team of eminent panelists, Dr. Aditi Chakraborty, Dr. Neeraj Bajaj, Dr. Manas Chatterjee, Dr. Rashmi Agarwal, Dr. Shruti Vidarkar, and Dr. Shishir Das. We look forward to a very lively and interactive session in the next 90 minutes. The cases showcased here have been processed at Wisdom Path Lab, Kolkata. Wisdom Path Lab is a Paulson's Derma initiative that aims at providing evidence-based dermatology. Wisdom Path Lab is led by Dr. Shubhra Dhar, our chief pathologist, who is renowned for her slides and diagnosis on the subject. Dr. Shubhra Dhar has been a faculty on the subject of dermatopathology in several global conferences. She has several publications in national and international journals to her name. Presently, along with heading Wisdom Path Lab, Dr. Dhar is also the Eastern Coordinator for the Dermatopathology Society of India. Dr. Shubhra Dhar's sole purpose at Wisdom Path Lab is to provide clinicians with specialized diagnostic services in relation to dermatopathology. Now, without further ado, I would like to request our chief speaker of the day, Dr. Shubhra Dhar, to take over the session. Over to you, Dr. Dhar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Good evening, friends. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 4th Dermatopathology Summit. I'm ever grateful to Mr. Partho Paul, MD of Paulson's Derma, for providing us with this excellent platform for knowledge sharing. And my heartfelt thanks to Ms. Urpita De, who, as usual, has provided all the technical help and done excellent coordination among the faculty members to help us put together this presentation. Today, I have with me eminent dermatologists from across the country, and together we will be doing the CPC to unravel the interesting cases. I would now like to extend my warm welcome to my fellow panelists. Please give me a moment. Okay. Warm welcome to Dr. Aditi Chakraborty, Dr. Neeraj Bajaj, Dr. Manas Chatterjee, Dr. Rashmi Agarwal, Dr. Shruti Vidarkar, and Dr. Shishir Das. We would like you all to participate by posting your comments and queries in the chat box below. If anyone wishes to speak, please let us know in the chat box. All the cases that are going to be presented today have been processed at Wisdom Path Lab, Jodhpur Park, Kolkata. It's a dedicated dermatopathology lab with state-of-the-art instruments. So that's my microscope, Leica microscope. And from this microscope and camera system, I'm able to take some beautiful photographs of the slides that are prepared in my lab. We are doing immunofluorescence with the Carl Zeiss microscope. This is a tissue processor. This is a cryostat machine, which is required for doing the direct immunofluorescence tests. And I'm very happy to share with you all that we have also recently started doing immunohistochemistry. In fact, 2 of our cases today have been worked up with immunohistochemistry done at our lab. Okay. Give me a moment, I'll open my presentation. Dr. Manas Chatterjee is our opening batsman today. Dr. Manas, we are ready with your
Yes,
case.
Gauri, I'm ready.
this is-
Ma'am, the other PPT is not being shown.
Okay.
We are stuck in the earlier PPT.
Okay. Just a second, give me a moment.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Can you see now?
No, ma'am, you have to share again, share screen. again.
Okay.
Share screen.
I think
It will not come. There's a problem.
you can see it now.
Ah,
Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
we can
Okay.
see,
Sure.
but
Any problem, Dr. Manas?
if you go to the screen, we will see, because what was happening was that the screen was getting cut at places. I think in the sharing option, there are 1 or 2 options. I think
Shall I close
maybe
this
just
screen?
stop share and just tell me the options. I'll tell you which one to click.
Okay.
Right.
Stop share.
And then when you go there, don't use the same option which you were using before. There are multiple options in the share screen.
I'll just close the presentation once again.
No, you don't need to close the presentation. You don't need to close the presentation. You need to select the presentation. You select the presentation and then share that. Select the presentation. When you are sharing, first select the presentation. Like click share screen.
Can you see it now?
No.
You can't?
You have to share screen, and then when that window opens, you will have to click the presentation. The presentation will be shown there. So when you click share screen, that window opens, na?
I have clicked share screen.
And
The
then
window has opened.
and you select click the presentation, click your PowerPoint. The
I did that.
presentation,
I did that.
and then you make okay.
I did that. And then I'm going to slide share.
No, don't do slide share. Don't do slide share.
No, not slide share. I mean, I'm doing the PowerPoint. I'm opening the PowerPoint
No, you can
presentation.
open the PowerPoint. Yeah, the moment you you select that PowerPoint and okay, then that particular PowerPoint will be shared. Otherwise, what is happening is your entire screen is being shared. So the PowerPoint is becoming.
You can't see the PowerPoint?
No, we can't. We can't. So
Ma'am, do you want me
select
to share? I have it on my end.
How
I
you do
think
it?
Arpita, you share it.
You do
I'm
it
doing
then.
the needful.
Ah.
Thanks.
Actually, it's a good thing we are getting a lot of new people are joining in.
Yeah.
So
So all parts of India are getting represented.
it is. Oh, it is
You can
maybe-
see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Is the screen visible, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I'll start the presentation, ma'am. As
Yeah,
per
you do.
instruction.
Please.
Ma'am, it's already started.
So
Yeah, you can go
Dr.
ahead.
Manash is
Arpita,
going to
just go ahead.
speak.
Just go ahead.
Just
Next
go
slide,
ahead.
please. So I'll just say next slide. Arpita?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is an interesting patient we saw with a growth over the forearm. So I'm going to just go over the clinical part of the presentation, and then the most important part of this case will be presented by Bodhi. So can we go ahead next? So yeah, this is a 68-year-old male. This gentleman presented with a history of multiple small raised lesions over the body since the past 2 years. And that, of course, he was not bothered about because this was he had been showing, and it was diagnosed as pityriasis lichenoides chronica histopathologically, and he was on some treatment. But what brought him for treatment was his growth over the back of the right forearm since the past 3 months. So could we have the next slide, please? So this is what the patient had over the body. These small little lesions, which were of course, as I said, diagnosed as pityriasis lichenoides chronica, clinically as well as histopathologically correlated, long time before the patient came to us. Next slide, please. So this, as I said, it has been previously, and this was something which he had before, and it really didn't bother him. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what he came to us with. This is what was the point of interest. He had this large growth, ulcerated growth, exophytic ulcerated growth over the back of the right forearm. So when I saw this, when you see a thing like this, the first impression is, yes, most probably we are dealing with some kind of a malignancy. Next slide, please. Yeah. So probably those of you who are interested could just write on the chat box what could be the possibilities. Or I think, Bodhi, can they write on the chat box, or they can?
Yeah, sure.
Or
Yes.
they can say also.
We have already got one diagnosis.
Okay. Yeah. So so that is what we all thought. the possibility was, first possibility in this case definitely was squamous cell carcinoma clinically. So definitely, but of course, the patient had pityriasis lichenoides chronica. So I was thinking, could there be a correlation between the old pityriasis lichenoides chronica and this particular lesion? Of course, I had the dermoscopy available with me. So that, of course, and all of you know that I do a lot of dermoscopy. So that was one option. But before I put the scope, so most people, yes, have thought of squamous cell carcinoma. Somebody's written sporotrichosis. Okay, maybe sporotrichosis, but this is an exophytic, ulcerated kind of a growth. So I wasn't thinking of anything other than some kind of a malignancy. So I think we'll just go to the next slide, please, Orpita. Yeah. So I was thinking, could it be correlate the PLC, or could it be a separate thing? So if we think of PLC, then sometimes PLC and lymphomatous papulosis can be confused. Sometimes there have been published reports of PLC converting to lymphomatoid papulosis, but I feel they were probably all lymphomatoid papulosis which were misdiagnosed as PLC. And some of these patients have actually progressed to necrotizing mycosis fungoides. So necrotizing mycosis fungoides is one thing which, if you want to really, stretch and try and correlate the first problem and the second, you could think of it. But that was much lesser of a possibility. I was, as I said, we were thinking squamous cell carcinoma, but what else could it be? What else could it be other than a squamous cell carcinoma? Yes, it could be a keratoacanthoma, which of course is a form of full squamous cell carcinoma. Basal carcinoma, less of a possibility. Could be an amelanotic melanoma. Yes, possible. Yes, somebody's written BCC, Rinki Singh. Yes, I can see that. Could it be, again, HPV-induced verrucous carcinoma? Could it be secondaries from some tumor somewhere else, the elderly gentleman? Sometimes a patient with mycosis fungoides, there's one published report of verrucous carcinoma and cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. I've put that reference in the bottom. So verrucous carcinoma in a setting of mycosis fungoides. So, so these were the various possibilities which came to my mind. Of course, definitely the first thing clinically, as everybody is written, squamous cell carcinoma, definitely. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I did a dermoscopy. Now, it's not very clear here, unfortunately. Could we go to the next one? Okay. Could we just wait a little bit on this? Okay, so what you're seeing on the dermoscopy is some kind of vessels, some polymorphous kind of vessels. If you're seeing in the center, it's not really showing up very well on this. So basically what we saw is, various types of vessels, hairpin vessels, some kind of corkscrew vessels. So various types of polymorphous vessels. In addition to that, could we go to the previous slide, please? Even in this one, what you are seeing is these multiple areas, structureless, whitish structureless areas. So we were seeing vessels and some structureless areas. So these are the two things that we saw on this, serpentine vessels, irregular polymorphous vessels, and some structureless areas. Now, when we see this, my dermoscopic diagnosis is squamous cell carcinoma. I'm sorry, this is not showing up too well on my on my screen, and I'm sure, I think probably because it's been converted to a PDF. Orpita, can you allow me to share screen for a minute? I can show it on the PowerPoint, and probably the vessels will be a little better seen. Is that possible?
Sure, sir. I'll stop sharing.
Stop sharing. I'll just share my screen.
Sure,
and
sir.
I think I'll show the vessels probably a little better, because
Sure,
it's
sir.
converted to PDF. It's yeah. Okay, can you see my screen? Is my screen visible?
Yes, we can.
Okay, now can you see the vessels? Can you see these hairpin vessels, irregular serpentine vessels, and these polymorphous vessels? You know, both of these. Can you see them?
Mhm. Yes,
So,
we can.
so that is what I was talking about. So in this, that's why I want to change. So you can see all these vessels all over that center. They look like wriggly worms. Okay. So when you see these kind of vessels, the first malignancy you think of is squamous cell carcinoma. So that's, so I'll just stop screen share now. Yeah, Urpita, you can go back to your screen, please.
Urpita, Urpita,
Yes, ma'am. Would you want to try once more?
I want to
Yeah, sure,
try
ma'am.
once more because I have to point out my slides. You know, it's very difficult otherwise.
Absolutely,
Now
ma'am.
that all my presentations are closed, maybe this time I'll be able to just.
Sure, ma'am.
But I hope the audience were able to see the vessels, because that's what really was something which I saw, and you know, when I sent this I did an entire excision. I excised the entire.
Is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Yes,
So
it
thank
looks
you,
the normal
Dr.
size,
Poonam,
ma'am.
for confirming that you were able to see all the vessels. Yeah, that's what I wanted to you all
Yes,
to
ma'am.
see, because in squamous cell carcinoma, the thing is that if you're seeing more vessels, yeah, we can hold it. Yeah, just hold on there, please. So if you're seeing a lot of vessels, we think of it as a less differentiated form of squamous cell carcinoma. If you see a lot of keratin, that's probably a more differentiated form. So if clinically, I will say this is probably a moderately differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. We see some amount of whitish structureless areas, which are the keratinous elements, and of course a lot of vessels. So more probably ill compared to well differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. So actually I excised this entire specimen and I sent this entire specimen to Bodhi, the entire lesion, and that was sent. And I think could we go to the next slide? I think yes. I think
So
now,
here is the
yes.
microscopic picture. Very unusual case. This is what I saw. The epidermis showed marked pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia. And the dermis was showing lot of cells, which looked pretty bland and innocuous in the first look. But as I zoomed in, something was amiss. It didn't look like a squamous cell carcinoma, definitely. And Manush was showing the blood vessels under the dermatoscope. And here you can see that under the microscope, the lesion was very vascular. All these are the blood vessels. Very vascular lesion with plenty of cells. Some of the cells could be identified as mature neutrophils. Lot of neutrophils were there, polymorphs, but along with them, there were these larger cells which didn't quite fit into what we normally see in a skin biopsy. Even if it is a malignancy, what kind of malignancy is it? In the first shot, I didn't even think it was something malignant, but it was surely something unusual. There were larger cells, and these cells had hyperchromatic nuclei. So I was suspicious that, you know, something is amiss here. And I could also see some mitotic activity. And as I spent some time with the slide, I could see there was a clustering of the atypical cells. Atypical cells appeared clustered, and with the keeping company to the atypical cells were a lot of mature neutrophils. So again, the blood vessels, you can see this looks pretty serpentine under the microscope too. And you can identify the blood vessel because of the presence of RBCs here. Some eosinophils can be seen over here, neutrophils, and interspersed among them larger cells with hyperchromatic nuclei showing some clustering and showing some mitotic activity. So I put in some markers. When in doubt, we should always take the help of the company that the cells are keeping, because the company was, you know, lot of neutrophils, eosinophils, all these cells were there in plenty along with atypical cells. I thought this was something hematopoietic, and I suspected a leukemic infiltrate. So whenever you suspect a leukemic infiltrate, you should always rule out a cutaneous lymphoma, leukemic lymphomatous infiltrate. So I put up this CD3 and CD20. Can you see? This is CD3 and this is CD20. Both of them are negative. However, CD4 was positive, nicely positive, and you can see the clustering. You can appreciate the cluster of atypical cells which are nicely CD4 positive. So this confirmed my hunch. These are all CD4 positive, and this is CD56 positive. So this confirmed my hunch that we are dealing with some hematopoietic disorder, hematopoietic malignancy. This is CD68 positive, but not very robust. This is MPO. You can appreciate the positivity. So I did one CD123 because now I thought that maybe, this is a case of BP blastic plasmacytoid dendritic cell neoplasm, that is BPDCN. But unfortunately, it turned out to be negative for CD123. Had it been BPDCN, it would have been strongly positive for CD123. That's one of the criteria for diagnosis of BPDCN. Ki67 was very high. This is Ki67, which shows that it's a rapidly proliferating tumor. So these were the positive markers. To summarize, CD4, CD56, MPO were positive, and it was negative for CD123, CD3, and CD20. So with this, I could make a diagnosis of hematodermic neoplasm with differential diagnosis of chronic myeloid sarcoma or CMS, or blastic plasmacytoid dendritic cell neoplasm, BPDCN. More markers and more cytogenetic studies are needed to narrow down the diagnosis. However, it is very important to recognize that this is a hematodermic neoplasm. Abnormal hematopoietic cells that have a tendency to home into the skin give rise to this kind of a tumor. When the skin is involved first without any systemic involvement, situation becomes very challenging. And as I already told you, a panel of markers, cytogenetic tests, and molecular studies are needed to arrive at a conclusive diagnosis. Sometimes the skin lesions conquer or precede the systemic involvement, and prognosis is invariably poor. In fact, when I did a literature search, most of the studies are limited to case reports or retrospective small studies. Sometimes you can also find this leukemic infiltrate in the skin, isolated leukemic infiltrate in the absence of any underlying systemic leukemia. But inevitably, eventually, systemic involvement sets in. So that is a case of hematodermic neoplasm.
It was really it was an eye opener for me, definitely. And so this is a realization that so even in addition to squamous cell carcinomas, you can see the similar types of vessels in a lot of other malignancies. So
yes,
that is one
particularly when I read more, I realized that if it is a chronic myeloid sarcoma, these are usually angiocentric proliferations. The cells proliferate around the blood vessels. That is why we got so much of blood vessels under the microscope as well as under the dermatoscope.
Thank you, Bodhi. It was a real.
Thank you, and thank you. I must thank you, Manoj, for the excellent excision biopsy. Had it been a small biopsy, the diagnosis would have been missed, I'm sure, because the infiltrate in the first instance looked quite innocuous. It is also described in textbooks that a very high degree of suspicion is needed to make a correct diagnosis, most often the diagnosis is missed in the first instant, even under the microscope. Because of your excellent, beautiful biopsy, I was able to diagnose this case.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you.
So any questions on this?
If you have a question, you can put it in the chat box.
Natural killer cells. You mean a natural killer cell lymphoma? It didn't look, the infiltrate didn't look lymphomatoid to me. A lymphomatoid tumor would be more monotonous actually. My narrowed down diagnosis includes two possibilities. One is chronic myeloid sarcoma and the other is BPDCN. And more tests, more immunohistochemistry markers like CD34, CD117, TIA, all this would help me to further narrow down the diagnosis. Can we go to the next slide?
Yes, yes.
Okay, next case. Rashmi, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. You
Yes.
can hear me, ma'am?
Yes. Can you
Good
see the
evening.
slides?
Yes, ma'am, I can see.
Okay, you can start your presentation.
Yeah, good evening. So today I'll be presenting two cases, which are not very uncommon, but the biopsy really helped in these cases. So my first case is an 8-year-old boy who presented with a localized itchy scaly lesion on the scalp for a very short duration. It was only for the past 2 weeks. The mother gave history that the child used to continuously rub on the affected area. The child is shown somewhere else and was applying topical mometasone with salicylic acid combination for the past 1 week. So this was his clinical history. There were no other family members who were affected at that point. Coming to the examination, so we saw the lesion. It was a localized, well-defined plaque covered with thick whitish scales, and there was some surrounding erythema and mild scaling in the surrounding area. On the affected area, there was hair loss, and on closer examination, few broken hair were also seen. The other areas of the scalp was not involved. Cutaneous and nail examination were normal. So depending on this examination, I thought I'd do one dermoscopic examination also. So on doing the dermoscopy, I don't know if everyone is able to see, we could see multiple hair shafts showing trichorhexis nodosa. So there was presence of whitish scales and few areas showed yellowish brown dirty looking scales at the base. Along with that, I could see multiple areas of trichorhexis nodosa. So depending on this, what could be the possibilities? If you all want to write down the possibilities on the chat box, you all can do that. The mother was very worried whether it is a case of psoriasis, as they had a family history of psoriasis. So we plan to do a biopsy in this case. Also, we do not have a picture here. KOH mount was done in this case, and the KOH showed presence of multiple spores. So biopsy was done in order to rule out whether there is an underlying psoriasis or not. So now ma'am will show the histopathological examination.
Thank you, Rashmi. So this is the scalp biopsy. It was a very beautiful biopsy, good 4 millimeter in thickness. And I used the Hobart's technique. First 2 millimeter was utilized to put the vertical section. And this is what I saw. The epidermis was hyperkeratotic with acanthosis. There is downward elongation of retid ridges. The dermis doesn't show much change, but you can appreciate a vertical area of fibrosis. This is usually seen in cicatricial alopecias. And there is a single pilosebaceous unit over here. And there is another over here. Okay, two of them are here. Rest of the tissue was utilized for transverse sections. And you can see how many follicles can be seen. In comparison to the vertical sections, the number of follicles in transverse sections is greatly increased, and it helps the dermatopathologist to make a better diagnosis. These are the hair follicles. Most of them are anagen follicles. And here you can see certain things in the hair follicle over here and one over here. So we'll zoom in closer to see what they actually are. You can also see erector pili muscle over here and sweat gland units over here and here. So this is the low power view. We can see the hair shaft is showing these rounded structures, and there is perifollicular fibrosis over here. There are two hair shafts now, which are showing these rounded spores, and both of the follicles show perifollicular fibrosis. Under the high power, you can see the nicely visible, large, rounded basophilic spores, which have infected the hair shaft. So this is endothrix infection. Okay. This hair follicle, in addition, is also showing some perifollicular inflammatory cell infiltrate. You can appreciate that. And this is a pastain. The spores are highlighted with the pastain. So the diagnosis was tinea capitis, endothrix infection. Endothrix because the hair shaft is infected. When the spores are present, spores or hyphae are present around the hair shaft, it is known as ectothrix infection. When it is present within the hair shaft, it is known as endothrix infection. Trichophyton tonsurens is the commonest fungal species that is responsible for endothrix infection. Spores within hair shafts is diagnostic for endothrix. The amount of perifollicular inflammation is variable. A superficial and deep perifollicular infiltrate of neutrophils, eosinophils, and lymphocytes may be present. In absence of spores, the biopsy will resemble any other inflammatory cicatricial alopecia. And it's very important to keep this in mind that when the infected follicles are few, it is very, very important to take horizontal sections, which always increases the follicular yield and thereby increases the chances of finding the fungal elements. Rashmi, you can describe the follow-up visit of the patient.
Yes, ma'am. So after 10 days, when the mother had come back, so she told that her elder daughter also started presenting with the same kind of lesion. She had a scaly plaque on the occipital area. And on dermoscopy, surprisingly for this child also, we could see multiple areas of trichorhexis nodosa. So there are 2 points I want to highlight here, which is important. One is usually when we talk about dermoscopic examination of tinea capitis, we see multiple areas of corkscrew hair. But here, because we did not find corkscrew hair, doesn't mean that we don't think about tinea capitis. So here, the trichorhexis nodosa might have been due to the continuous rubbing of both the children because of itching and the irritation that was being caused because of the scaling. The second thing I would like to highlight is that at times there'll be thick areas of scaling on the alopecic patch. So in that case, if we have, we should always go for a KOH mount. And in order to, if at all we don't get anything on KOH, we should always go for a biopsy because at times we might not see the spores. So we should always go for a biopsy whenever there is the slightest doubt. So this was post-treatment with antifungals. There was good response in 2 weeks' time. So we'll move to the next case.
We move to the next case.
So this was a 50-year-old diabetic female who had presented to our OPD with gradually progressive red lesions on the face, back, and the exposed areas of the arms for the past 1.5 years. There was mild itching on the lesions, and this itching, along with redness, used to increase on sun exposure. She also gave history of stiffness of joints of hands for the past 7 years, the small joints of the hands, but there was no deformity of the joints that was seen. So on closer examination, we could see that there were multiple areas of erythematous infiltrated plaques which were present on bilateral cheeks, the upper back, and on both the extensors of the forehand. These were small reddish papules which had grouped together to form infiltrated plaques. The nail and mucosal examination was normal. There was no lymphadenopathy. Systemic examination was also normal. So a punch biopsy was done and sent for histopathological examination. I would like the audience to put forward their possibilities on the chat box that what could be the differential diagnosis. So we had thought about polymorphic light eruptions, then Jesner's lymphocytic infiltrate, sarcoidosis, Hansen's disease, pseudolymphoma, and to add in the examination, I would like to say that there was the sensations were normal and there were no thickened nerves.
So this is what I saw under the microscope. This is the scanner view, this is the low power view, and you can appreciate the nicely circumscribed granulomas which are present here in the upper dermis, and they also extend down into the reticular dermis. Slightly elongated, oblong in shape. This is the high power view, nicely circumscribed, mostly composed of epithelioid cells with very scanty lymphocytic infiltrate within the granulomas. Lymphocytic infiltrate was present more towards the periphery of the granulomas. What was striking about the granulomas was the surrounding the granulomas, there were areas of fibrosis, and the lymphocytic infiltrate was more concentrated towards the periphery. These are the epithelioid cells, elongated nuclei, elongated vesicular nuclei, and ill-defined cytoplasm. Epithelioid cells are nothing but the activated histiocytes. So as Hansen's was a possibility, I did a fight for Farako stain, which was negative. This is the reticulin stain, which showed that the fibrotic, the fibers that were present around the periphery were traversing within the granulomas, highlighted by the reticulin stain. You all can appreciate it. See the reticulin fibers traversing into the center of the granulomas. So when the granulomas, they involute in this particular situation, they involute from the periphery. The fibrosis starts from the periphery and proceeds into the center. And the diagnosis rendered was cutaneous sarcoidosis. Sarcoidosis is a great mimicker both clinically and histologically. There is no gold standard for diagnosis, though certain clues are evident histologically, which I just described. Sometimes you can see asteroid bodies, but in this case, they were not much evident. For a good histological diagnosis, you should always weigh in for or against the clinical diagnosis of sarcoidosis. And always a clinico-pathological correlation is a must.
Ma'am?
Yes, Rashmi?
I think they have told about Sweet syndrome in the chat box and SLE. SLE, I think they have told about it when you were discussing about the histopathology.
No, there is no question of Sweets. Okay, they must have said this when you had asked for the diagnosis, because after seeing the histopathology, I'm sure nobody's thinking of Sweet syndrome anymore or SLE, because you won't see such well-defined granulomas in mixed cutaneous, mixed connective tissue disorder? No, we don't see such granulomas. And it is always a clinico-pathological correlation that is required to arrive at a diagnosis in case of, in any dermatological case. Any other question?
Yes, we had asked the patient to do the ACE levels as well as calcium levels. We had also asked for other investigations like chest X-ray, but the patient did not turn up for follow-up again. So I had to find out the reports of these tests.
Okay. So we move on to the next case. Shruti, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are nicely audible.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So, I would start my presentation by about 2.5 weeks ago, we had there was a patient, 63-year-old male who's a resident of Bangalore. He came to us with few chief complaints of the lesions that you can see. They were minimally painful, multiple recurrent discharging nodules, mainly on his right buttock and his right thigh. He initially faced these symptoms in 2005, but it was aggravated present status since maybe 2 months.
And he presented to you recently?
Just, yeah, ma'am, 2.5 weeks back. So when we probed into the history, he gave us a history which he dated to about 16 years back, where in 2005, he noticed first a small bump on his right buttock, and he had met a surgeon. He has no records of his history, but he was admitted for fistula surgery, and he was operated for the same. And after about 3 months of his surgery, the patient noticed more bumps, more lumps on his buttock, and a lot of blackish discoloration on the posterior aspect of his upper 1/3 of his right thigh, and involving the buttock as well. Can you show? Yeah. So then the surgeon, he consulted the surgeon again, and they'd asked him to go for the sinus tract exploration. And then the debridement was done, and the attenders say that there was a lot of muscle involvement was told to them. The debridement was followed by about full thickness skin grafting on the right buttock about 3 months after the debridement. After the grafting, maybe he was free from the lesions for up to 8 years. And then he started developing similar episodes of 1 to 2 draining sinuses once in 3 to 4 months. He just took regular course of antibiotics and drainage of the sinuses. And then he started on his Ayurvedic treatment from 2015. He underwent multiple drainages from the Ayurvedic doctors as well, once in 4 to 6 months. But he never found any permanent solution to it. And that was when he came to us maybe 2.5 weeks back. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so on examination, when he came to us first, we saw there were multiple erythematous, to few skin colored, few hypopigmented nodules and plaques. They were soft to firm in consistency, mainly on the right thigh involving the groin region, and also on the grafted area on the buttock, on the right buttock. And there were multiple old healed lesions, there were old scars, and there were a lot of discharging nodules with serosanguinous discharge and a lot of induration on the surrounding area. So we did a further investigation, examination. There was no regional lymphadenopathy. There was no organomegaly. He was he was not an immunocompromised patient. He had no comorbidities, and he had no pain on walking or any limp or anything. So there were no signs of any bone involvement as well. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So we chose to do an incisional biopsy from one of the nodule, which was an active discharging nodule, keeping in mind all the conditions that can present with sinuses, like mainly the deep fungal mycosis, like mycetoma or sporotrichosis, or even chromoblastomycosis, and mainly the actinomycosis, which can also have sinuses, and even cutaneous tuberculosis, and coming to even Kaposi sarcoma we had thought of. And that was when we sent an incisional biopsy to ma'am.
Okay.
There's a lot of
This was
actinomycosis.
Yeah, this was a very good biopsy that I received. Very representative biopsy. It was a good incision biopsy, which is very necessary when you have such cases in order to arrive at a correct diagnosis. The epidermis is unremarkable, and you can see a lot of inflammation in the dermis, and you can make out the basophilic structures over here. They lie in the upper dermis here, and we will zoom in closer to see what they are made up of. The dermis showed lot of abscesses. This is an intradermal abscess, you can see over here, admixed with a lot of histiocytes. These are all neutrophils. Looks like a map over here, a basophilic structure. This is your routine H&E stain, and you can see that this basophilic structure is surrounded by this pinkish material on its outer aspect. And in turn, the neutrophils are arranged on the outer aspect of the pinkish material. So this pinkish structure that we see here is nothing but immune complex deposition. And what you see is the Splendor-Hepley phenomena, nicely highlighted. These are all neutrophils. Basophilic structure lying within a abscess in the dermis surrounded by Splendor-Hepley phenomena. This must be representing a colony of either a fungus or a bacteria. This is a PAS stain, which is brightly positive. And I will show you, this is a GMS stain. This is, though it is showing the colony, it is not very sharp and bright. And this is a Gram stain. You can see the filamentous nature of the organism. Here, it is Gram positive, and the filaments are quite thin, approximately 1 micrometer in thickness. So we are dealing with a bacterial colony. This is not a fungal colony. This is a bacterial colony. Had it been a fungus, you would have seen thick hyphae, which are 3 to 5 micrometer in thickness. But these are filamentous bacteria, which are Gram positive, and fungal colony would not have been Gram positive at all. I rendered a diagnosis of actinomycotic mycetoma. We will discuss certain important aspects of this case. Actinomycotic mycetoma should be differentiated from eumycetoma, which is a true fungus. As I just described, you can appreciate the difference in size. But in this particular case, the differentiation from actinomycosis was extremely challenging. Actinomycosis is caused by Actinomyces israeli, which is an anaerobic endogenous filamentous bacteria. However, actinomycosis is more common in the cervicofacial region. Next common region is thoracic, then abdomen, and even the perineal region can be affected in rare cases. Actinomycotic mycetoma is caused by 3 main genera: Nocardia, Actinomyces, and Streptomyces. And all these organisms are acquired exogenously from the soil. It is usually a disease of the rural population. When people work barefoot, especially the farmers who work barefoot in their fields, they get infected by these organisms. On microscopy, actinomycetoma usually has a very cartographic appearance. Cartographic means it resembles a map, and it has a very basophilic character, whereas actinomycosis is paler than actinomycetoma. Our patient belonged to the mycetoma belt, and the discharge was serosanguinous. The characteristic sulfur granules that we see in actinomycosis was not present in this case. Actually, sulfur granules are nothing but the bacterial colonies that are extruded from the sinuses, and and why it is called sulfur granules? It is not because it is chemically sulfur. No, it is the color. It's the color yellow, because sulfur granules are usually sulfur granules are yellow in color, and actinomycosis is associated with yellow grains or yellow granules. That is why it is known as sulfur granules. But it is not sacrosanct to the actinomycosis bacteria. It can also be present in other bacterial infections. The colonies were visible by H&E were brightly PAS positive. Actinomycosis is not so brightly PAS positive. Culture studies and molecular studies can further help in differentiation. However, again, it comes with a rider. Fungus, many often fungal organisms are very fastidious. They cannot be grown. Very often they are outgrown by the super added bacteria that are present along with the fungus. And extensive literature search did not yield any solid, tangible points of differences and continues to be a gray zone. This table is from Fitzpatrick's dermatology textbook, and you can see how similar actinomycosis and actinomycetoma are in terms of clinical pattern and appearance under the microscope. See, the clinical pattern in both is lump with draining sinuses, in both actinomycosis as well as actinomycetoma. The region is slightly different. Actinomycetoma is more common in the feet, back, and extremities. In actinomycosis, it is cervicofacial, thorax, abdomen, and pelvis. In case of actinomycosis, they are usually commensals. They are present in the mucosa of the oropharynx, the respiratory tract, the intestinal tract. In case of actinomycetoma, they are acquired from the soil, and the grains are present in both cases. The grain contents are filamentous bacteria in both cases, and both are gram positive. However, one is anaerobic and the other is aerobic.
Yes, so after Shubhradar ma'am.
Just a second,
Yes,
Shruti. We'll just look at the chat box to see whether there are any relevant questions. Okay, they are related to your treatment. So you can proceed, Shruti.
Yes, ma'am. The discharge was again sent for culture and sensitivity also. And there was surely a secondary bacterial infection with the staphylococcal colonies. And we had done ultrasonography as well, which showed just multiple collections in subcutaneous layer, and X-ray was also done to rule out any bone involvement further. So on the treatment lines, we had a clinch between either the modified Welsh regimen or the modified Raman regimen. So the audiogram is important in this case, where in this patient, the audiogram showed sensory neural hearing loss. So amikacin was ruled out to be given. So we chose to give him the modified Raman regimen. Can you just show that, the next slide? Yeah, so patient has just been started on the modified Raman regimen. The treatment is not yet over. He's just been started with the intensive phase. So hopefully he'll do well. And really thank you, ma'am, for differentiating it so well, because the treatment is completely dependent on your histopathological diagnosis.
Okay, thank you, Shruti.
Thank you, ma'am.
We move on to the next case. Shishir, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for this great opportunity. Greetings to everyone. So moving on to my case, next slide. So this 38-year-old hypertensive street vendor from Bhagalpur, Bihar, presented to our institute with gradually enlarging skin bumps over his hands and face for the last 1.5 years. And he noticed a recent increase in size and number of lesions for the last 4 months. He also had some asymptomatic whitish patches over both his underarms, back, and flanks in symmetrical fashion for the last 7 years. Next slide, ma'am. On further query, he informed us about being treated for Kala Azar almost 20 years back. On clinical examination, we found numerous lesions of polymorphic character comprising of macular, papular, and nodular lesions distributed symmetrically. There were these hypo or depigmented, well-demarcated patches with irregular outline over axially, lateral side of trunk, and medial side of upper arms and forearms. Here, we found some slightly erythematous, succulent, discrete and coalescing papules merging into annular plaques. On the right, there were focal areas of scaling and crusting, mainly over the nose and forehead, and the chin, and also his elbows. These are the succulent plaques over the elbows, and on the right, you can see the annular plaque. He also had slightly hyperpigmented and erythematous nodules over the dorsi of hands and fingers, almost disfiguring them. We moved on to taking a biopsy from a nodule over the dorsa of his hand, this nodule here. And we also took an imprint smear for Giemsa staining during biopsy. Over to ma'am for histopathological correlation.
This is what I saw under the microscope. The epidermis showed varying thickness, and the dermis showed lot of confluent granulomas, very reminiscent of a leprosy pattern. These are the granulomas, confluent coalescing granulomas, curvilinear, very reminiscent of leprosy, as I just said. And the granulomas showed lot of admixture of plasma cells. The history was very indicative of leishmaniasis. I did a special stain and it revealed the characteristic basophilic round bodies within the cytoplasm of the histiocytes. You can see this. The entire slide was studied with these round bodies actually. These are nothing but the LD bodies. This is another view where you can see that the round bodies are present in almost all the cells. The diagnosis was post-Kala-Azar dermal leishmaniasis. A dermatopathologist feels very happy when something very tangible is visible under the microscope. You feel happy that you are able to diagnose the case correctly. In India, visceral leishmaniasis is caused by Leishmania donovani. And the visceral form is the commonest presentation. PKDL patients present with hypopigmented macules that progress to flesh-colored or erythematous papules and nodules. Clinically, they may be confused with lepromatous leprosy. They can be differentiated from diffuse forms of cutaneous leishmaniasis by history of previously treated visceral leishmaniasis. Variety of ancillary tests like Leishmania antibody tests, intradermal Montenegro test, PCR tests, etc. are now available. And it is extremely important to rule out histoplasmosis. This is a case of histoplasmosis. A simple special stain for fungus can help you in making a confident diagnosis of histoplasmosis. Histoplasmosis is a deep fungal infection and it is highlighted by PAS. As both histoplasmosis and leishmaniasis are common in India, a correct diagnosis is very important. And Shishir, you also saw the LD bodies with in the imprint smear, isn't it?
Yes, we did an imprint smear and carried on a Giemsa staining on our OPD, and we found LD bodies all around the histiocytes, and also extra cellular mastigote forms also were found.
Okay. What was unusual about this case was the parasite load, isn't it? You normally don't see so much of parasite in case of PKDL. In case of primary cutaneous, you can see good parasite load, but not in case of PKDL. Organism is hard to find. But in this case, it was packed in all the histiocytes. This was very unusual about this case.
Yes, ma'am. Especially the nodules actually contain more parasite loads, and this patient had all three types of lesions all over his body.
Okay. Thank you, Shishir. We move on to the next case.
Someone is asking for an imprint smear, I think.
Okay. I unfortunately don't have the picture of the imprint smear.
Can I share my screen very rapidly?
Maybe at the end of the session, you can do it.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. We'll come back. Okay.
Okay.
Next case by Dr. Neeraj Bajaj. Dr. Neeraj Bajaj, please.
Okay, hello. Yeah, can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. This is an interesting case. This case is a 32-year-old obese person. He presented to us with 5 years history of getting sometimes itchy, sometimes slightly painful lesions on his shin. The lesions would never go away completely, and they would keep coming back, and every 2 to 3 months. So when he presented to me, there was a worsening of the lesion since last 3 months, and there was itching and pain. So I'll show the photograph first. Can you show the photograph, the third slide? Yeah. So this is the picture of the patient. Can we go back?
Yeah.
Can we please go? Yeah. The previous one. So when the patient presented to me, at that time he had dry scaly patches on both shins. Right leg was a bit more involved here than the rest. There was slight underlying erythema and slight induration. There was slight tenderness. Patient had significant pedal edema. At that time, his main complaint was that it was quite itchy. So I thought that it's probably some eczematous process. There is some slight inflammation going on because of scratching. There's some infection. He had no varicosities. There were no systemic complaints at that time. Can I have the next slide, please? So he was investigated at different. The investigations were not actually done at the first visit. The investigations were done on the follow-up. His CBC and ESR were done. CBC did not show any leukocytosis. ESR was about 26. His LFTs, CFTs, lipid profile were normal. Blood sugars were normal. Chest X-ray was normal. MONTO was about 12 to 14 mm. In between, he would develop edema, bilateral pedal edema, which was quite significant, and edema would be in, around the ankles also. So I took a physician consult to see that if we were missing out on any systemic cause, but no systemic cause was found by the physician. On the first visit, the patient was put on topical steroids. His itching and surface changes resolved. However, when the surface changes resolved, there was a dusty red erythematous indurated lesion which was persisting. The patient was comfortable, then he disappeared. He again developed itching and ascetosis. Later on, that is when he came back to me. Then I was actually thinking what it could be. Is it some form of paniculitis that is happening with some dermatitic changes on top of it, or there was no history of application of any irritants. He had been applying steroids off and on, but no applications of any irritants that would explain the inflammation. Then other thoughts that cross, is it recurrent cellulitis kind of thing occurring? But being bilateral, no fever, no CBC was normal, and that was again something I could not think of. Then other thing that crossed my mind was inflammatory stage of morphia, but then bilateral symmetry, lots of edema. So I was really stuck. What am I dealing with? And that is when we did the biopsy. And biopsy report was a bit surprising. And this is after the biopsy report. Based on the biopsy report, I put the person on treatment. And these are the images sent by the patient on WhatsApp. He did not turn up after that. He was very comfortable with whatever we had given him. All his edema and erythema have subsided. There is only a dry patch that is there. and rest Dr. Shubhra ma'am will tell, and
Okay.
then I'll come back.
Okay. So this is what I saw under the microscope. The epidermal changes of eczema were definitely present. There was orthokeratotic hyperkeratosis. There was acanthosis. Thickness of the epidermis has increased. There was spongiosis. And the dermis showed this prominence of blood vessels in a lobular fashion. The blood vessels were increased in number. There was evidence of neovascularization. You can see here the lobular proliferation of blood vessels in the dermis. The blood vessels have got, they are lined by thickened endothelial cells. The walls appear thickened, and they are surrounded by some perivascular lymphocytes. These are the sweat glands. This is the lower part of the dermis, reticular dermis. And you can appreciate the increased fibrosis in the dermis. Normally, the sweat glands would be accompanied by some amount of adipocytes, but adipocytes are replaced by these collagen bundles here. So this signifies that the dermis has undergone fibrosis. This is a high power view which shows that the endothelial cells are plump and the blood vessel wall is thickened. So this signifies neovascularization. You can also see the perivascular presence of mononuclear cells or lymphocytes. And since clinically erythema induratum was suspected, I looked carefully at the subcutaneous fat lobule. There was mild perivascular infiltrate near the septa, but there was no sign of paniculitis as such. Pretty clean subcutaneous fat lobules. Some hemorrhage could be seen around the fat lobules. So pretty clean subcutaneous fat lobules, and the thickness of the dermis has increased due to fibrosis. So I gave a diagnosis of venous eczema with lipodermatosclerosis. Patients with long-standing stasis can develop eczematous changes. Epidermal changes of chronic dermatitis are often present. There is glomeruloid proliferation of capillaries. The lobular proliferation of capillaries is also referred to as glomeruloid proliferation of capillaries in the dermis. And the reticular dermis shows fibrotic changes. Extravasated RBCs can be seen in superficial and deep dermis. And some blood vessels can also show presence of fibrin thrombi. Yeah,
So,
Dr.
when I got the biopsy report, we called the patient, and we, based on the biopsy report, since there was no active paniculitis, I asked the patient to use spray bandage, and I put him on a combination of proxyrutin and calcium doxycycline, and advised him to get a Doppler test to see if there is any. There were no obvious varicoses, but a Doppler test was advised. So after that, the patient had a very rapid improvement, and in about 5 to 6 days, he called up and he said that it's much better. And now the problem is with the WhatsApp. So the patient did not turn up. He just kept asking me, I am better. Should I continue with the treatment? And so he has continued with the treatment for 1 month and is almost completely recovered. So when I selected this case, I was quite confident the patient would get a Doppler done so that our workup is complete and we know if there is any venous problem there. The patient promised that he'll get it done, and unfortunately, today morning he was saying that I am getting the report. That's something which, if would have been there, then that would have made this workup absolutely complete. So this is a case diagnosed by a pathologist of a condition, the treatment decided by the pathology report, and there's a beautiful response to the patient.
Thank you, Dr. Neeraj.
Yeah, thank you.
You were saying something?
Yeah, the thing is that it's something which I wanted to sort out. Why is he developing these changes? Is it a venous disorder, or is it getting some recurrent inflammation that is causing some lymphatic blockage, or whatever it is, and that somehow could not be sorted out because we did not get the patient back.
The biopsy was very good, actually. It was of adequate thickness. I could nicely visualize the subcutaneous fat lobules, and it is very much necessary to have an adequate biopsy to arrive at the correct diagnosis. All my clinicians have provided very beautiful biopsies, because of which I could arrive at a correct diagnosis. Today's cases, you can see all the biopsies are very nice.
Yeah, the biopsies for this was something which was taught to me by Dr. Asha Kubar. She said that if you want to do a biopsy for a suspected paniculatis, always use a punch and go deep. That way you will not miss the fat. So I'm really using a 5 mm punch rather than using a scalpel, because with scalpel sometimes you create a wedge and miss out on the deeper aspect. So I then use a 5 mm bigger punch and go really deep, and most of the time you get enough.
And she always says that don't select the pack for diagnosing anything which is related to the subcutaneous fat. She also says this. Paniculitis is one of her favorite areas of research, I think. Okay, can we go to the next case now? Aditi Di?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can I have my first slide? This is a 62-year-old. No, there's some missing, slides are missing.
Ma'am, your voice is echoing.
I know, because all your voices are also echoing. I'm not too sure why that is happening.
Okay.
You've missed some slides.
Okay.
The initial slides are missing.
Do you have them, Aditi Di?
I have them on my phone. I'll just...
You can read it out. You can read it out.
Okay, this was a 62-year-old housewife who presented in April this year when she noted a swelling near her right armpit for 1 month. The swelling was not painful and it did not restrict her movement in any way. Together, she also had low-grade fever on and off and had noticed increased sweating. She's a known hypertensive, hypothyroid, together with dyslipidemia and hyperuricemia. She's on medication for these ailments and well controlled. She had a significant past history. In 2017, she noted a non-tender swelling over her right arm, just above the cubital fossa. At this time, a Mantoux test was done and there was no induration after 48 hours, and a skin biopsy showed lobular paniculitis. In May 2010, she had a right-sided breast nodule with low-grade persistent fever and sweating. A mammogram at that time.
Just a second, Aditi, just a second. Huh? You can switch off your phone and you can now present from this presentation because it's creating some echo.
Is it better now?
Yeah. Still there's some echo persisting.
I don't know why though. I can't figure out why.
Is your phone on?
Phone is far away from me now.
Is the Zoom on the phone?
No. Phone is now on aeroplane mode.
Okay. The echo continues.
I don't know because even your voice is echoing.
Okay.
Should I continue?
Yeah, you can continue.
Okay, the mammogram at that time showed diffuse edema in the inner half. breast, and a biopsy showed chronic mastitis. There's also a history of being treated for possible tubercular lymphadenitis in 1984. There was no significant family history. Next slide, please. The lady was otherwise well. There was no pallor or icterus. There was a single non-tender, indurated, subcutaneous nodular plaque lesion over the right axillary fold, measuring about 2 into 2 centimeters. The overlying skin was hyperpigmented and tethered to the plaque, but the plaque itself was not attached to the underlying structures. There was no local or regional lymphadenopathy, no breast lesions were palpable, and there was no hepatosplenomegaly. Next slide, please. Her blood tests were essentially normal, except for a hemoglobin of 10.6%. LDH was within normal limits. An incisional biopsy was done on the plaque, keeping in mind the possibility of paniculitis. Over to Dr. Dhar.
Okay. This is what I saw. It was again a very good biopsy, starting from the epidermis right up to the subcutaneous level, and you can see that there was relative sparing of the epidermis and the upper dermis. And as you come into the middermis, there is some inflammation, which becomes more intense around the area of the subcutaneous fat lobules. Here you can see a lot of inflammatory cell infiltrate in the subcutaneous fat lobule. It is in the pattern of a lobular paniculitis. It infiltrates the fat adipocytes in a lace-like manner. Some necrosis can be found here, and you can appreciate the infiltrate, very dense inflammatory cell, very dense lymphocytic infiltrate. This is a high power view. You can see the adipocyte rimming by the lymphoid cells. These lymphoid cells are atypical in the sense that they are larger than the normal mature lymphocytes that we see. Not only are they larger in size, the nuclear contour is also irregular, and they appear more hyperchromatic. Look at the fragility of the nucleus. There is a lot of karyorrhexis, because of which you can see these basophilic nuclear debris. This indicates that the nuclei of the lymphoid cells are quite fragile. Karyorrhexis and the atypical collection of lymphocytes in the subcutaneous fat lobules. You can see some amount of hyaline necrosis over here. Adipocyte rimming by atypical lymphocytes. So we are dealing with some atypical lymphocytes in the subcutaneous fat region. So we should think of the possibility of subcutaneous paniculitis like T-cell lymphoma. This is a CD8 stain, which is highlighting the atypical lymphocytes. Very nicely positive. CD3, again, intense positivity in the lymphoid cells. Ki67 is quite high, almost affecting 80% of the cells. It indicates the high proliferative index. CD4 and CD56 were negative. So you can give it. So I rendered a diagnosis of subcutaneous paniculitis like T-cell lymphoma. It is very important to rule out a lupus paniculitis in case of SPTCL, both clinically and histologically. Histological clues that help to differentiate it from a lupus paniculitis are there are no epidermal changes in case of SPTCL, and the inflammation is more or less confined to the subcutaneous fat. The composition of infiltrate is predominantly lymphocytes in case of SPTCL. In case of lupus paniculitis, you have a good admixture of plasma cells. Immunohistochemistry stains help to a great extent. Special emphasis is on Ki67 hotspots. Even a limited panel of Ki67, CD8, CD3, and CD4 is useful. And last but not the least, considerable clinical and histological overlap between the two might represent two opposite ends of a spectrum. Lupus panniculitis being on the benign end and SPTCL being on the malignant end. Some additional investigations were done in the follow-up. Aditi Di?
Yeah, because of the diagnosis of subcutaneous panniculitis like T-cell lymphoma, a whole body PET scan was done, which in addition to the axillary lesion, showed metabolically active tiny subcutaneous nodules in the lower anterior abdominal wall and right flank. A more extensive immunohistochemistry was done at the Tata Medical Center, and it confirmed subcutaneous panniculitis like T-cell lymphoma. She was started on methotrexate 20 milligrams per week, and she's doing well. Just an update on what she had in March 2017. She had a similar lesion on her right forearm above the cubital fossa. The ANE and dsDNA at that time were negative. Immunohistochemistry again was consistent with subcutaneous panniculitis like T-cell lymphoma. At that time, she was treated with thalidomide 50 milligrams twice a day for 2 months with complete resolution. Thank you.
A very important feature of SPTCL is that prognosis is very good with 5-year survival of more than 82%. However, if the patient has hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, then the prognosis becomes worse, reduces to almost 50%. The 5-year survival. That brings us to the end of this summit. Thank you to all my co-panelists for sharing your excellent cases, and to the audience for your patient hearing.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, dear doctors, for joining us today for this session and for being so interactive and for your participation. I especially thank our esteemed panelists, Dr. Aditi Chakravarti, Dr. Neeraj Bajaj, Dr. Manas Chatterjee, Dr. Rashmi Agarwal, Dr. Shruti Bidarkar, and Dr. Shishir Das for their very interesting cases and their valuable insights. Last but not the least, I would definitely thank our subject expert, Dr. Subhra Dhar, for such an enlightening session. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to extend a word of appreciation and thankfulness to the team at Parsons Derma, Mr. Abhilash Banerjee, Mr. Orithro Goswami, and Mr. Oyan Banerjee for all the help and coordination that they did. Thank you once again, everyone who participated and joined us today.
Dr. Shishir Das wanted to show that imprint smear.
Yes, yes. Dr. Shishir?
Oh, yeah. Can I share screen?
Reminder, sir.
Shishir, go ahead, please.
Okay, ma'am. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So this is the imprint smear we did. You can see the small purple dots around these histiocytes. So this is called the double dot appearance, which is the amasticate forms of the Leishmania Donovan body. So this is it.
Thank you. Thank you, Shishir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone, once again. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.